Hello, what's going on? Rich Ryan here. Today, I'm going to talk about the HYROX race that just happened in Dallas in April in 2022. I'm going to talk to you about my specific race plan, my splits, how that plan went, and some of my key takeaways moving forward for training and racing. So if you like this type of hybrid racing content, hit me with a like and subscribe so you can get all of this content directly into your feed as we continue to learn more about this sport as it continues to grow. All right. So let's take a look. Okay, so first thing in this race, I decided I needed to run a faster time. In the HYROX this year, they're taking the top 15 times in the world to move forward for the World Championships. Doesn't matter where you raced it, what it was, whatever your time happened to be, that's the qualifier. Going into this race, my time was 15th from Chicago in January. So I was hanging on by a thread there. So I knew I had to run a fast time. So that was really what I was thinking about going into this. When I look at my splits in the previous races, the place where I lose the most time from the top athletes are the first three stations. So I wanted to push it a little bit faster up front just to see if I could manage the fatigue there. And if I got in over my head, if I could come back and still race well while getting some of that time off of the front end. So let's see how that worked. So we'll see here's my split sheet. This is on the left is from the most recent race in Dallas. On the right is the race in Chicago. And the total time is just how much of time I saved in that. So the first run went out pretty hot. You can see from this run from the last race in Chicago, it's much faster. The Chicago start was pretty long. This race was a little bit long as well, only maybe 2 or 3 seconds longer than what would typically be in a full 1,000, where Chicago was really long. And that's the thing with these races. The running courses aren't always going to be the same. So you'll see in the Chicago splits, the first run and the last run are longer than all the rest of the runs. And I think that those middle runs were going to be a little bit shorter even from distance. So it makes it seem like it's a little bit faster. Where Dallas was 2 laps every single time, big long straightaways. You came in and out of the same place. So it was a little bit better of a more consistent course. So early I got out a little bit fast. I had the intention of kind of taking this race out. Hunter was in the race. And if it was a regular foot race, I'm typically going to be faster than Hunter, and depending on the distance. But most distances, I think it's fair to say that I would be able to outrun him. So I thought I'd be able to have the lead early because of that advantage that I have. But he went out hard, and he was very fit. So I just kind of stuck behind him, and the pace didn't feel necessarily comfortable in that first 1,000 meters. It would have been comfortable if it was an 8K without the stations, but it was definitely the fastest I've gotten out in a HYROX event. So you can see right away the split is 17 seconds faster, but it was again, the first run in Chicago was long. I would probably say it's probably 10 seconds faster than what that effort was. And then going into the ski erg was about 3 seconds faster. And this is with the transition as well. The transition in Chicago wasn't bad from the ski erg. It was really long on the later stations, and that will kind of play into the times. But the ski erg was probably about the same. My pace was probably a little bit faster. It felt controlled. I wanted to be around 148 to 150 on per 500. So I managed to stick right around that and was out the door in a good time. Hunter was gone at this point, and I came out of it second, and Dylan Scott wasn't too far behind me. The third run was, again, pretty fast. So it was 3:28, and I think I was still trying to catch up that time that I knew I had to make up for the total time here, again, to try to improve my position in that top 15. So again, it's pretty fast. I came out of the ski not feeling bad. Sometimes I'll feel pumped in my arms, and I didn't feel that too much, but the pace and the tempo still felt kind of fast, which was fine at that point. That's what I wanted to do coming into the sleds, where I hit the sleds in a 4:28. This is an okay time for the sleds. I would have wanted it to have been under 4. I was hoping for 3:30, and you can see in Chicago I was under 4 in 3:54. But so I was about 30 seconds slower here, and it felt really hard. There wasn't too much to say about it. Sometimes these sleds just feel hard. It felt harder than Chicago. It could have been because my effort was a little bit higher, where I was pretty conservative on my early runs in Chicago, but as I came into the push, it felt It felt hard. But with that, I didn't lose much time. I got out of there second place again. I actually put some time on Dylan, who was at third at the time, and the rest of the field was pretty much gone at this point. It was some strong dudes in the field who really had a hard time in that sled push area. And then the factor after that is that my run was 15 seconds slower than what my run was in Chicago. So right there, I've already given up a 49 seconds. So and with the 15 seconds or with the 20 seconds that I had gained in the first two stations, the run and the ski erg, I've already given back 29 of those seconds. So not awesome. And coming into the pool, I was feeling tired. Dylan had passed me on this run, so now I am in third, and typically I won't get passed on the runs. So I was really struggling at this point, and to be struggling so early in a race like this is something that I kind of preach about. It's like, don't go hard until like after the sleds. Don't go hard in the first station. Don't go hard on the ski. Don't go hard on that second run. Save it for the sleds. Push after. I ignored my own advice and I just went for it, went hard. And by the time I got to the sled pull, it was a minute and 40 seconds slower, and my run was 10 seconds slower. So again, I'm just bleeding time at this point, and I'm kind of all by myself. Some silver linings: my burpee broad jump was a little bit faster, which is great. And again, I think this was one of the areas where the transition zone between Chicago and Dallas for burpee broad jumps was probably slower at Dallas. So with this and still being 211, while feeling bad and having it be pretty hot in there and just not being necessarily in the race, this is a good sign. So I did practice my form on this. I'm going to release a video down the road about some burpee broad jump technique I've been really working on, which is an area that seems pretty straightforward, but there is some things you can kind of modify to make it a little bit better. But then the run right after was terrible again. And the row came in. This is a little skewed, the 415, as I stopped and dumped water on myself before I got out of the rock zone there. So again, this is a little bit slower than what it probably should have been. This should have been added maybe to the run, which was 15 seconds slower. So every single run, it has been 10 to 20 seconds slower than my runs in the previous ones. I'm just struggling. On the farmer's walk, I mentioned how it was hot, and when that happens for me, I get really sweaty, and it's hard for me to hold on to those kettlebells, even with a lot of the chalk. So I had to drop it twice, which in Chicago I went unbroken, and you can see that's a 32-second difference in that there. And at the row, I came and sat next to Dylan. Dylan was about 500 meters ahead of me, which is about a minute and 45 seconds for Dylan. So in Chicago, I had beat him in the wall balls by close to a minute and a half. So at this point, I'm like, I'm not quite out of this, but after the runs and the farmer's walk just being poor, it was really hard to kind of make that up. Getting to the lunges, again, I was happy about how this kind of played out. 3:30 on lunges isn't terrible, 20 seconds slower than what I was in Chicago when I was mixed up in a race and feeling better. So everything was really just kind of bleeding time from the sled push on. Every single run was slower. And the only run that was faster was the last run, and that was because it was shorter than the run in Chicago, because that was a very long run there. And then the wall balls, again, 4:11, not bad. It's fine, especially at this point in the race where I'm not feeling great. I know it's not a good time. I know I didn't meet my goals, and so I still hung on for 4:11 while I was kind of breaking them up in a lot of different ways. I did like 30, then did like 12 more, then did like 8 more, and just like consistently going with short sets and short breaks. So getting to 4:11 on that isn't terrible. So some silver lining there is the wall balls, the burpee broad jumps were solid, and that's really about it. So when we look at the totals, the station totals were over. It's almost all the time that I gave back, where my previous time in Chicago was 3 minutes faster. My stations were almost 3 minutes and 20 seconds slower. My run was a minute slower. The rock zone was much shorter here. That's where we kind of make up the time between the two different events, and that's why it doesn't seem like the run and the station work add up well. But the rock zone was much shorter here when I was only 2:55, where it should have been even faster on that, where it was 2 minutes slower than that, a minute and a half slower than that in Chicago. So that's the results of the Dallas race, and overall, it's extremely disappointing about how it went. The plan wasn't one that was completely vetted. It may have been a bit of overconfidence and also just a lack of awareness on where my strengths are. Really, I should have even tried to push even harder on the back end. But coming into this race, I wanted to run a faster time, and I also wanted to see how I'd be able to stack up in the competition at the World Championships. Like, I wanted to be competing against Hunter and Kent, so I have to see how that feels, right? Like in my previous race in Chicago, they were just gone so fast. They hit those first stations so hard, so I wanted to see like what it would feel like to be there with them early. And it just showed that I'm not quite there when it comes to the muscular endurance pieces with the heavyweights of the sleds, and that I need a little bit of work there and just overall strength. I think it would help on that as well. Doesn't mean I wasn't in good fitness and that I couldn't have run a good time. It was just a bad plan. But it was a plan that in hindsight, it looks terrible, but in the moment it felt like that was something that I needed to do. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't great for this particular race and for me to need to do a time. I wanted this race to kind of be a stepping stone and try to get some different experience, but it turned out that it was really meaningful and for the season as a whole. And again, with that, so as Dylan ran a good time, he was outside of the top 15. He moved into the top 15, which bumped me out. So now I'm 16. I'm on the outside looking in. I got to wait for some roll down to see if I'm going to get into this heat. So the outcome of the event overall was pretty bad. It's pretty devastating in terms of what I went there to do and what actually happened. But again, that's one thing that I need to. This was a good lesson in that, where if I take my focus off of the process and off of what I need to do at each station and where my strengths are, focusing on myself, and I start to deviate away from that into what I have to do to compare myself to others and to be better and to get a better result and to get a better time, it typically is going to lead to disappointment. And I found that across the board with myself in training, with the athletes who I coach in training, when it's based solely around a time, solely around a place, it leads to comparing yourself to others, which is negative, and then you can kind of start to spiral in the race when you realize the race isn't going your way, and then you kind of like drift off and don't give it your all. So the back half, so maybe I had some time here on the board. No matter what, I don't think I would have been able to match Dylan at this point or get even further into that top 15 just because the plan was poor. But once the plan started going off, I kind of started spiraling down, and this comparison and this trying to do more and do better and have a better time, it kind of changed my training, changed my race plan. It really kind of screwed everything up, which is a good lesson to learn, and it's good to kind of be brought down to earth for that. Again, it's just unfortunate timing for that. With the qualification system, it is flawed, right? Like that this race, which was an inconsequential regional race, they didn't even pay out for the top athletes here, so it wasn't even necessarily an elite race, but that this race mattered more than the Chicago race, which was an actual championship race for those who are going to qualify into the World Championships. Doesn't really make sense. There's not a ton of sports where you can just like show up to a regional race from a regional race and then make yourself way into the championships without qualifying by racing, by just hitting a time to get there. All these courses are different. Like we just looked at the two different courses between Chicago and Dallas, and they're different, right? Like they're not the same. The runs are different. The rock zones are different. The sleds are different. The European races are obviously different, where their sled times are much more advanced than ours. And I find it hard to believe that the athletes who are doing that are stronger than the Ryan Kents and the Hunter McIntyres, where their sled pushes can be faster than theirs. So, and with that, even though there's a flawed system here, this still put the race is still on me, right? Like I still had the opportunity to put myself in a position that would solidify my spot. Dylan Scott grabbed it and made it so that he solidified his position, and I didn't do that, right? Like I just didn't have the right plan. I just didn't have the right fitness in place, and I paid for it. And so right now, again, I'm just on the outside looking in. Kind of sucks. But either way, I'm going to be in Vegas and running either whatever heat they'll have me in, and I'm going to bring it as much as possible. So in terms of training, I'm not going to change too much. It's only about 4 weeks from here, so just going to kind of try to build a bigger engine and then just have a better plan, because I don't think my fitness is off of this. I don't think this is indicative of that, but it's just a matter of executing the plan, man, and that's the end of the game. There's a lot of learning in these races, and that's basically what happened. So if you like this content, hit us with a subscribe so you don't miss it. Hit me with a like on this video. Hope to see you guys out there in Vegas. and I'll talk to you soon.